Hello, everybody. Welcome to 321 No Kiddin. I am Bobby the Awesome, and today I am joined with another new friend. It's so much fun getting to be able to meet people online and virtually, and this be our first impression. So, welcome to the show, Kay.
Thank you. Hi, everyone.
I'm happy to have you here. So, we're going to be starting from ground zero. So, why don't you introduce yourself? Maybe tell us a little about where you are. Why did you want to be on the show today? Anything you want to throw out there?
Okay, well, as you said, my name is Kay. I am from New Jersey, born and raised, and I still reside there. I recently, like the last year, became a mental health advocate due to some some of the things that I've struggled with, and I realized that this topic was at that time something that really wasn't being spoken about. Lately, it's starting to, come to light a little bit more. People are a little bit more open to the idea of mental health. So I just felt that it was important to begin to amplify this subject matter because there are a lot of people suffering, and unfortunately, they're suffering in silence. So I wanted to be that beacon of light to, create a safe space for people to know that it is okay not to be okay, and it is okay to reach, seek help.
I love that. And I think the more voices that are out there spreading that message with their own personal flavor and style, the
Mhm.
more the people struggling can relate to, right? Like the more faces, the more personalities, the more like you have some pretty ambitious goals that sound pretty exciting, which is a different style than my strategy. So that is amazing. So
Thank
do you want
you.
to do you mind sharing your story a little bit about like what led you to this place?
Sure. So in 2017 is when my journey began. But prior to that, I had a lot of PTSD from a lot of the things I've endured growing up. But at that point, I didn't know that those things affected me. There was a lot of abuse, a lot of, I was molested. My mom was a battered woman. There was a lot of things that I just pretty much suppressed and just moved on through life. So as I got older, I was living through a lot of that trauma. And then once things got real for me in 2017, it exacerbated the current circumstances. So I had just had, as a previous mother of, at the time, my sons were 17 and 15. I had just had another child. Yeah, fun. So I, was struggling with that psychologically because my kids were pretty much grown. So I had a lot of I was postpartum, and it went undiagnosed. I again suppressed it. I was going through a lot of things with my oldest son in the streets, and there was a lot going on with him. I owned my home at the time, and I was me and my son's father, the baby, we were together for 6 years, and we were breaking up, and there were just a lot of different things that were triggering me. And unfortunately, one day, um, I had entered a very dark place in my mind, and I became suicidal, and I was going to kill myself. And right when I was about to go and do that, like I'm breaking down, one thing I can say is my faith played a major part, a major, major role. And if it wasn't for my relationship with God, I would not be here today to share this story. But I was praying, and like I had it. I snapped, literally. I literally snapped. And I'm praying and I'm telling God, I'm crying. I'm like, God, I'm sorry. I don't want to do this no more. I'm done. I've had it. And God spoke to me and he said, go get a hotel room for 3 days. And I'm like, no, I'm sick. I'm done. Like, I'm, trying to tell God, like, I'm not doing it. I've had enough. And he said to me, I said, God, I feel like I'm breaking down. And he said to me so clearly, and I could still hear it as I say it. God spoke to me. He said, sometimes I have to break you down to build you back up. Go get a room for 3 days. And I did that. Now at that point, I snapped back into where I needed to be. And I did. I went and got a room. And that was the beginning of my journey. So from December of 2017 to January 2020, there was a lot of things going on in my life that I realized that, the things that I was enduring had a lot to do with mental health. But, within certain communities, the Black and Brown communities, it was always suggested that mental health didn't apply to us. There was like a negative stigmatization with it. So all I knew was to just endure, endure, endure. And that's what I was doing. But me enduring is what almost ultimately cost me my life, because the current circumstances and all of the things that I had buried, it spiraled. It was festering for so long, and I snapped. And so because I became suicidal, and then I had a walk with God for 3 years, he showed me a lot. He's, given me a new perception, a new life. And at the end of it, this is what he told me that I need to be doing. Sometimes we go through things not for ourselves, but for other people. So I am happy to be a voice for people who feel like they don't have a voice.
Thank you for sharing that. I have a couple questions, not because I'm making assumptions, but because I'm curious.
Mhm.
And because this is an addiction arena, right? So you kept
Mhm.
saying you were pushing things down and suppressing and stuff. Were you using, like, what was your coping mechanisms? Was it just like blocking it out? Were you using alcohol? Like, what did that look like for you?
So at one point it was just, just suppressing, just moving on, just going through life. And at some point I became a marijuana user, because marijuana, in a sense, it relaxes you. So it would get me out of my current mind space. You know what I mean? Like, it would of course, the problem still exists, but at that moment, I don't care about it because I'm high. I'm under the impression of marijuana. But at some point, the marijuana stopped working. You know what I mean? And thank God I never, transitioned into anything else, but it stopped working. But at the end of that, marijuana no longer being useful for me, I snapped.
Mm,
Literally.
yeah, that makes sense. So I have a question, but I know it's going to lead to a big open door. So I'm going to write it down so I don't
Okay.
forget it.
Okay.
So the other thing you said, and I love it as you've been speaking, there's a few themes that seem to show up with my guests.
Okay.
The theme of recognizing that it's our past impacting our present, right? And it's the trauma
Absolutely.
that leads to the mental wellness. The theme that there's voices in our heads, or our gods, or our higher selves, or whatever. So I really liked hearing how you shared that. And then you
Mhm.
used the term, you walked with God for 3 years. Um, I've never heard it quite worded that way. So do you mind sharing with me what you meant by that?
Sure. So my walk with God was me trusting in him to show me all of the things that I needed to see to become a better version of myself. So, again, people, you live through your trauma and you're not really living in your authentic self. So there was a lot of things about me that I needed to work on, based on some of the things I've been told, like growing up, like I mentioned that the household that I grew up in was a very abusive one. There were certain things that my stepfather would say to me that I took on and lived through that. So I needed God to show me these things. And he did. When he said to me, sometimes I have to break you down to build you up, that is exactly what he did. He tore me down. When I tell you, Miss Bobby, I look back and I don't know who that person was, but I feel like God allowed me to undo everything that was done to me. And now I am living in my most authentic self. I don't carry the weight of other people's stuff, because a lot of times we are recipients of other people's mental health, bad mental health, their trauma. We're recipients of it. And so often we pack that on and make it ours when it isn't ours. And only when you become aware is when you're able to be like, okay, listen, this is not right. I have to get better with this. But so my walk with God was just more so me walking a path of getting to know myself, getting to love myself, getting to understand that what happened to me wasn't my fault, and trusting God throughout the process. Because, as God says, faith without works is dead. So it isn't enough just for me to pray. I have to act, I have to participate, I have to actively participate in my healing. And that's what I did. But in the course of that healing, I learned so much about myself that I did not like. It was so much stuff, but when you're unconscious, you're not living in a conscious state, you just, oh, that's just me, you know. But that wasn't me. It was me living through a lot of trauma, being a single mom at a very early age, and you know, just going through life and not really taking the time to reflect and get to know me and love me and be okay with, you know, the things that occurred and just move on. So my walk with God was very pivotal in what I'm doing now.
What are some of the tools that you used, Kay? So you know that you have to do the work. You know you have to reflect. Are you journaling? Are you going for what? Like, what does that look like in your world to do that processing? You said you had to take the action. What
Yeah.
was some of those examples?
So I did write a lot of things down because sometimes we keep everything in our brains and you can't make sense of it because it's swarming constantly. It's you changing thoughts, you know, from one minute to the next. So God said, write it down, make it plain. So when you write things down, you open up space for you to receive other things. So
Mm.
it took a lot of praying. I know for me, I would ask, you know, like exes, I would ask what did they feel my deficiency was? You know what I mean? Because if I needed to work on my attitude or how I spoke to people, I needed to understand what that looked like. So it consisted of that. It consisted of listening to certain podcasts that, you know, Bishop TD Jakes was vital. And, you know, and when I was dealing with the spiritual aspect, you know, I listened to Oprah Winfrey, Joel Osteen, I believe his name is.
Yeah.
Um, you know, and you know, they have a plethora of topics. So anytime I was feeling something, I would go through those topics and there will be
I
one
do the
applicable
same
to me. Do
thing.
you?
Yes, with
It's
Joel
so
Osteen.
helpful.
Because anytime I'm in a mood and I can't get out of it, the way they break it down, it's like,
Yeah.
okay, I need the reminder, I
Yeah.
need the
Yeah.
perspective.
Yes. Yes. And when I was, you know, going through, you know, because again, I was going through it emotionally, psychologically, mentally, spiritually. So every time there was a different feeling, I didn't fight it, right? I didn't fight it, but instead I embraced it because what you resist persists. So I embraced it and I felt that God was trying to give me direction. So when I would listen to these specific podcasts, it would give me a different way to process what I was feeling instead of being like, oh, I shouldn't be like this or I shouldn't be. It was like, no, I accept it. This is the message and move on. You know, I know for Oprah, she had a guest. His name was Eckhart Tolle. And do you know Eckhart Tolle?
I do.
Oh, he is, I'm telling you, Miss Bobby, that was so pivotal because he has so many different um, segments where it dealt with the mind. And we don't realize how powerful our minds are. For it to be a measly 3 pounds, it controls everything. So, so
Sure does.
I got to, you know, and sometimes I will listen to it 2 or 3 times, you know, anytime I'll be riding to work, I will put it on just so I could keep hearing it. And a lot of that helped me to transform my thought process. So during the time where God was breaking me down to build me back up, these things um, pretty much allowed me to think in a different manner versus how I used to think. You know what I mean? So, or I would listen to gospel music. So there was a few different things that I would do just so I could really get what I needed to get from this long 3-year journey. It was long.
What I loved about what you said, I mean, aside from the fact that you took the action and you did it, and that we have so many people and strategies in common, aside from
Mhm.
all that, what you talked about, and I want the listeners to hear this, right? Especially the gamblers who think, you know, if they're in their 2017 in their darkest days, being an addiction that has to do with money, right? They're probably thinking they can't afford the thing to make them change. And you just listed a lot of free, accessible resources for each person, right? Like it doesn't have to be, you don't need a car to get somewhere. Like you
Right,
don't need
right,
anything.
right. But you know, a lot of it comes from knowing yourself and knowing what it is that you need and what can fuel you. So I knew at that time I was getting to know myself, and I was listening to some of the thoughts, not all of them, because the typical person, we have anywhere from 50 to 70,000 thoughts per day. And of those thoughts, 40,000 are negative. But it was important for me to extract the positivity out of everything and really learn myself. And once I began to learn myself, I knew what it, you know, what could work for me, what will help me through what I was feeling at that moment. So that's the best thing a person can do for themselves is learn themselves. Because a lot of times we don't know. Like I had actually posted something on my social media a while ago, like maybe like months ago, and I asked people, what makes you happy? People cannot answer that. It's, oh, my kids, my job. No, 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 no. Those are external. I want to know internal, what makes you happy? Is it going to get a massage once a month? Is it, you know, you just calling out of work, taking a mental health day and doing nothing, binge watching your favorite show? You know, just things that give you time for you. You know what I mean? Because we're so busy dealing with kids, job, life. Sometimes you need to take a breather and just step back and allow, if no one's refueling you, you have, well, you really can't rely on other people to refuel you, but we need to be refueled. And that's what people don't realize. You know what I mean? So it really takes a lot of self-care, which is what mental health is. You have to be okay with stepping back and just taking a moment for yourself and being unapologetic about that.
Oh, I love it. I love it. All right. I'm going to ask well, you just said like self-care and all of this. So you learned all these things not formally. You learned them all through your journey. You
I
haven't gone
did.
to school or any of that. Okay. All right.
Nope.
So here's a question.
Mhm.
Now, it's going to be easier for you, I imagine, than it is for me. But so I heard of Eckhart Tolle because I'm in a alcohol-free group. And they
Okay.
did his book for book club, and they went to an outing to go see him and things like that.
Mhm.
And we have very little Black and brown in that community, and it's all across the country. So what can we do? What can I do to help get that message? Because it's not that they're not suffering. And I didn't
Right.
understand how did you word it at the beginning of the show that like mental wellness wasn't for them, or
Yeah.
it
Yeah. It was always said that mental health didn't apply to us.
didn't apply
You
to
know, yeah, it didn't apply to us. And we took that on. Like for us, mental health, well, I can't even say mental health because that wasn't a thing. We were just taught to endure, you know, and that's what we did. And when you endure and you don't have a proper outlet, nowhere to release, you know, these toxins or whatever, nowhere to talk, you know, because you couldn't even talk about it to other
mm,
Black and brown people because they'll be like, oh, you this person crazy. You talk about killing himself. You know what I mean? There wasn't a safe space. So, you know, typically people keep it inside and they live through that. Sometimes people have hair trigger tempers because it's so much packed on. But the only thing I feel like we can do at this point is just really kind of just drive it. You know, people need to understand, like, that's why I'm the face and the voice. I'm I'm a black woman. You know, I just turned 40. I was going through a life storm and I want to share my story so people realize that we all have a lot in common. If you have a brain, mental health applies to you. And also, there was always a misconception about what mental health encompassed, right? So it was more so, you know, mental health and mental illness are two complete separate things. Mental illness is a clinical diagnosis. Mental health simply speaks to self care. And if
mm,
people understand that it's just self care, it's not suggesting that something's wrong with you, it's not suggesting that you need medication, it's not suggesting that you're weak or there's a lot of different ideologies behind what mental health is. So I just want to really continue to get the word out so people can begin to unpack, because there are so many people living with a lot of darkness. You know, I have friends who was molested growing up. You know what I mean? And people carry this, and this goes on with them into their relationships, and there's just a lot of falsehoods. So um the main thing at this point is just, I'm trying to get, on as many podcasts as I can. Like I told you earlier, I'm trying to get my own show. I want to be able to have a safe space for people, and not just for Black and browns, for everyone. But I just really feel like we really got to get on the ball with accepting that mental health is a thing, and it does apply to us. 100% applies.
I agree. And your passion is so beautiful about it.
Thank you.
And you're doing the right thing by getting out there and being on shows and telling your story and being this vulnerable and open. And I really do appreciate that. And you kind of stole the thunder. I was going to ask about the TV show Dream, if you want to expand on that. That was going to be like after we got through the tough stuff, because sometimes we just can't talk about the tough stuff. Like, I'm in some communities. I don't know if you know who Stormy Wellington is. But she's a coach, and her and Grant Cardone. So you got this billionaire white dude and this millionaire Black chick, and he's embraced her, and she's like part of the family, and she really represents, because there's not enough Black and brown in the entrepreneurial community either.
Right.
And it's, they set a really good example where before their relationship, would I have been comfortable asking you that question? No. So that's why I want to know what I could do, because it shouldn't be my shit to be uncomfortable. I should ask, even if I'm uncomfortable.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
My actual point, though, that I was getting at is there is a little bit of a connection, and you're making it easier because you're saying you're not alone in a different way. Just like as females, we have to say, you're not alone, women. I had a guest on. It hasn't gone public yet, but she was a porn and sex addict, and even I felt the things come up. A female sex addict, like the question marks.
Yeah.
So it's really important what you're doing in that way to remove some of those barriers.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm very proud of you, Kay. I'm very, very proud of you.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
So is there so when you go on a show, like, you want to share your story, your intention is to get the word out. Is there anything that I'm not digging into that you really want to convey to the listeners? You got 105 countries listening right now. No pressure.
That is a lot of pressure.
I don't know in this very moment, but once we launch, we're in 105 countries. So you have a world platform here to speak your heart, whether it's your mind heart or your God heart or a combination of both. What would you say to them?
I would say to them that it is okay not to be okay. Women, you don't always have to be strong in terms of what society depicts. Men, you are not emasculated if you're having a moment. You're human, both men, women, you're human. I just really want people to understand that sometimes it isn't our fault. And it is okay when you believe that you need help. Actually, the way strength is defined is endurance, which is true, but there's also strength in vulnerability, and also understanding and accepting that you need help. And there's nothing wrong with that. I don't care what society says. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a positive step. It's a positive move for you. And it trickles down to your children and your relationships. Guess what? I'm not going anywhere. I'm still here. I'm not going anywhere. I want people to understand that is the best thing that they can do for themselves, is seek the proper help if they need to, because it is something that plagues our communities and ourselves. And again, if you become a better version of yourself, you'll be a better parent to your child, because you won't be so irritable. You'll understand life differently, and you'll be able to pass down certain values and different techniques for your children when they, start to face this cruel, cruel world. You know what I mean? So like friends, you'll be able to empathize with your friends more. You'll be able to, be more of who you're destined to be when you unpack everything. And the only way you begin to unpack is if you acknowledge that you may need to unpack, because you can't begin to correct a problem that you don't feel exists, right? So once you know that there is a problem, there's something holding you back, understand that it's more than likely not your fault. You grew into this, but now, mental health isn't, what's the word I'm looking for? Mental health a lot of times isn't ours, but recovery is. So it's up to us to begin that journey to recover from the things that we may have endured, so that we can be our most authentic selves, and again become to teach this to our children, our friends, our significant others, or whoever you're around. You'll be you'll be lighter, and you'll be a better person pretty much toward them, and a better person in society overall.
I love it. You just reminded me of something that I learned from a coach. Is it okay if I share something with you? And you're welcome to pass it on if it works.
Absolutely.
He used to go, and before COVID, have a workout once a week at a shelter. And we would do the workout, and then he would teach a lesson. And one day he asks us at the end of the night, he says, would you rather have your brain intact, or and have no teeth, or have all your teeth and not a functioning brain? So of course everybody wants the brain and doesn't care about the dentures, right? So his follow-up question was then, well, why do you brush your teeth 3 times a day, but you don't do anything to take care of your brain?
That's a good one.
I know, it stuck with me, and my listeners have probably heard it a dozen times or so, because it just always shows up. It's like, oh,
That's a good one.
Yeah. So you're welcome to that.
Thank you. That's a gem. That's a gem right there.
Yeah, it stuck with me all these years, and I'm like, okay, I have to share it. So I'm going to backtrack again, because you just said something else. You said a lot of important things here, so I'm bouncing all over. So you have a young child, right? That's what, 5 or 6?
He'll be 6 in September.
Okay. See, I was paying attention.
Yes, you were, Bobby.
So now you had all this trauma and all the things you weren't aware of for the 17 and 15-year-old at the time, right? So maybe they're in their early 20s, if I'm keeping track, right?
Yes.
So you raised them with a different mindset and awareness than you are now, the younger one. Can you speak to maybe the differences in that?
Absolutely. One thing I can say is, outside of how my mind was different with them, because of what I lacked growing up was like love, attention. I was big on giving that to my children, so they would never lack that. I never wanted my children to grow up feeling, not knowing what love feels like, right? But in terms of discipline, I will admit I was guilty. Like when they would cry, sometimes I'd be like, stop crying. Like I wouldn't find out what their problem is. With Tristan now, if he's crying, I want to know why you're crying. Let's talk about it. Before, I was shutting them down. Stop crying. Men don't cry, but I was a young mother. I didn't know any better, but I wouldn't dare say that to Tristan now, because I know better. And when you know better, you do better. So although they, had love and, all that, I feel like I could have been better in terms of how I dealt with them, with their emotions, because their father, excuse me, wasn't around. So I was taking on the mother and father role. And that was a lot to take in. And especially when you're young, you're still trying to learn yourself. You're trying to figure it out. You're trying to, level up and, get your own stuff. It was a lot going on, so that was just, that's what I was taught. And you pass on what you were taught. You know what I mean? So until I had this journey, this walk with God, I wasn't in the right state of mind in terms of, telling them, well, let's talk about it. Are you okay? Or do you need a moment? It was just more so like, shut up. You are all right.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like, Tristan, now I'm like, well, why are you crying? What's wrong with you? You know what I mean? Like, I feel that we need to understand what's wrong with people, because when children don't have an outlet, they suppress. And it's not fair to them to grow up with suppressing their feelings. I want them, my son and children around, like, I want them to understand that you're human too, although you're a child, but you still have feelings and your feelings matter. So that's the only thing I could really say that I would do differently with the older boys, is kind of tap into why they felt certain things, or if they were crying, I wish I didn't shut them down. I wish I listened. But again, when you know better, you do better, and I'm making sure I do better this time around.
I like that. When you know better, you do better.
Yes.
That's cool. So I want to come to a closure with a very happy note. So talk about your vision and why you're on the podcast, and what your TV show looks like, and what you see happening with that.
Sure. So I envision myself being the next Oprah. No, I'm just kidding. That's way down the line. That's way down the line. I just really want to spread awareness. I want people who look like me to be able to be like, oh, okay, so wait, maybe that's why, I want to be that beacon of light. We live in a world that's so negative. That is so negative. Every time you go on social media, you see nothing but negativity, and they're getting major hits. I don't get major hits because I'm a positive person, but that's okay because I'm doing God's work. And I know that at some point, I ain't gonna say but God's vision that he instilled in me will come to fruition. But these are just the channels that I have to go through. So my goal is to get on as many podcasts as I can, so I can spread this awareness so people can think differently about mental health, and see that it is a real thing. And in terms of the show, I want to create a safe space for people. I want to have a platform that people can, because a lot of times people aren't comfortable sharing their vulnerabilities, especially with the world or a stranger. But if they're able to go to something to get an idea of what everyone else is going through, it may make them come to terms with the things that they're facing and become comfortable, even if they don't speak out in public about it, but seeking proper help. Like I feel like with therapy, it's important that people do their due diligence. It isn't enough to just seek a therapist. You have to understand what your deficiencies are and what it is that you need, So I feel like you should have a criteria, because a lot of people, inbox me, they DM me, can we talk? And I talk to a lot of people offline. But people need to understand that you have to have a criteria. So writing it down, what your issues are. So when you go to, try to find a therapist, maybe you need a white male, maybe you need a Black female, maybe you need someone between the ages of such and such. Maybe you need their degree to be in a specific area. That maybe that you need to have them within a certain distance from your home, because if they're too far out, you may not be consistent in going. So there's a lot of things that I think people need to understand about what mental health encompasses, and how to pretty much get to a better spot mentally. Because a lot of people tell me, oh, that therapy doesn't help. And I'm like, okay, so how'd you find your therapist? And then I go over it with them, So I'll tell them, like, develop a criteria. And then people come back, oh my God, Kay, thank you. Because people don't know, right? People don't know. So I just want to have a space for people to be able to come to and or watch, so that they can begin to unpack what they have that's been festering, and just to pretty much just become the better versions of themselves.
Are you going to remember us, people, and do I get to come on the show?
What? Miss Bobby, you're the first guest, okay?
Yay. Well, I think both of our dreams are I know both of our dreams are going to come true, and we'll be doing it together. We can have some fun.
Absolutely.
So is it going to be like the Kay show?
It's called The Experience with Kay.
Ooh, I love it.
Because everything that we go through is experience, right? So for me, my experience is what birthed this whole vision. So the experience with Kay, and then everyone else's experience, and you're with Kay, and the whole little cute little thingy.
I love it. I love it. Well, Kay, it's been a real pleasure getting to know you, and I appreciate everything that you're doing and your full transparency here with me tonight. This was really awesome. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. I so appreciate it.